What excites you? What creates passion? What gets the juices flowing? What excites you? For our children, it's probably a snow day. For some gathered here, it might have been the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl. For some, it might be an upcoming vacation, maybe an upcoming tax refund, maybe a new or restored relationship, or maybe, just maybe, soon, the first whiff of spring. Let me ask this question. What do you think might excite God? When I first came across this thought of what excites me, somehow the Spirit worked in me this week to reverse that question and move it toward God. And it took me back for quite a while this week, because I have never truly entertained this question: what excites God? What gets God's juices flowing? What's God truly passionate about? Now, I can define fairly accurately what pleases God. I know a little bit about the love of God. I know a little bit about what God requires, but what does God get excited about? That was new territory for me this week. And the more I dove into the story of the four friends and the crippled man, I think the Spirit shed light on what God views and sees as exciting. Dive in this with me for a moment and let's see where it spits us out today. I begin by sharing that I believe that God gets excited first and foremost about sacrifice. Think about it. The house was packed, standing room only. Even if the man could walk into the house, there would have been no room for him. No one seemed willing to step aside to give up his or her spot, to sacrifice a seat, just so a soul, a paralyzed man, could simply have a spot. In my humble opinion, I believe that one of our biggest challenges as a church, big C and little c, is to deny and sacrifice our self-interest and embrace an authentic humility. Let me unpack that for a moment. We often view mission and outreach as something that happens during the week outside of worship. On Sunday morning, we worship, we fellowship, we learn a little bit, but true outreach and mission happens outside of worship on Sunday morning. To that I want to say, oh no, it doesn't. I believe for most of us, or many of us, this is the largest, richest harvest field we encounter during the week. To have 100 or 200 people gathered in one place at one time, where we can be in mission and outreach with each other on a Sunday morning. Our challenge is to embrace worship as a sacrifice to God, a sacrifice to one another, rather than a feeding trough of religious gluttony. The greatest hindrance of people coming to Jesus, I will propose this morning, isn't what we think it is. I do not believe the greatest hindrance of people coming to Jesus is the fall football programs in our community. Or the soccer programs that are run in our community. I've heard it for over 30 years. You know, Pastor, if they just didn't have football and soccer programs, our church would be filled. Really? That's the best you got? Seriously? It's because of the soccer and football that our sanctuary is not filled. I'd ask that you revisit that. You see, the greatest hindrance of people coming to Jesus is not even the atheist or the agnostic out there that doesn't understand us. But we Christians just love to find people we disagree with and blame them why we don't grow. It's football, it's soccer, it's the atheist, it's the agnostic. Oh, it's Hollywood. It's Wall Street. No, it's not. It's me. It's you. It's us. I believe that we are the greatest hindrance of people coming to Jesus. It is our attitudes, our comments, our callousness, our apathy that gives every lost person every reason not to come to Jesus. So the question this morning I want us to wrestle with is, are we willing to sacrifice our comfort, our ease, our security, and even our pew? Now you're meddling. Or our church standing, so that another person can simply find a place. I think God gets excited when we sacrifice. And I know that even here on Sunday morning, this can be a daunting place. I don't know how many times I hear it. I just don't know everybody here. I know so few people here. That's where we need to sacrifice and say, hi, my name's Mark, what's yours? Can we sacrifice to get up from our pew to go meet someone we do not know yet? It's that kind of sacrifice that I think excites God. What excites God is through that sacrifice that we exercise a faith that is real and genuine. You see, these dudes did not give up. Those four did not give up. They risked falling. They risked failing. They risked further injury to their friend. And it certainly was not kosher to de-roof someone's house or interrupt Jesus in the middle of a sermon. But friends, that's what real faith does. Real faith shows up. It acts, it overcomes criticism, overcomes rejection, and it goes beyond forming a committee, or what we often do as Christians is we say, I'll pray about it. Faith shows up. It's been said, as you look into this passage, if you just look at how the four men overcame obstacles because they believed that Jesus could heal their friend and they acted accordingly. As your pastor, I am absolutely embarrassed at the number of times I've convinced myself that I believe in something but did nothing about it. And if my faith journey has taught me anything, it is that belief and faith are seldom synonymous. It's been said God is more concerned with the faith of the saint than the doubt of the sinner. Let me repeat that. God is more concerned with the faith of the saint than the doubt of the sinner. Because great doubt does not hinder God as much as little faith. Because of our faith, we can bring people to Jesus and allow God's love to overcome their doubt. I believe that sacrifice excites God. I think that real, true, alive faith excites God. But finally, I believe that forgiveness excites God. As soon as Jesus saw the sacrifice of faith of the four, he said to the paralytic, "My son, your sins are forgiven." What amazing words. I'm going to unpack that just for a moment. My son, your sins are forgiven. Now, do you remember in the video what happened next? Jesus said, your sins are forgiven. What happened next is what happens in most churches. The good church leaders begin to grumble. There's some grumbling going on. The church leaders were grumbling and questioning, and then Jesus began to uncover their spiritual blindness. And he said, what is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or take up your pallet and walk? Please follow me here. Because the easiest thing for Jesus to say was the hardest for him to do, and the hardest thing for Jesus to say was the easiest thing he could do. Follow this path. Was it hard for Jesus to heal the man? No, not at all. He could easily make the man walk again. The hard part was saying to the man, get up and walk. Because that was put up or shut up time. You would know instantly whether or not the man was healed. Now let's turn that question around and ask, was it easier to say to the man, your sins are forgiven, or to actually forgive the man? Saying the man's sins are forgiven, no one is the wiser, because no one would know whether his sins were forgiven. But doing the forgiveness cost Jesus everything. To heal the man's body took a simple command. To forgive the man's sin took his blood. The first was done in a house of friends, the second on a hill with thieves. One took a word, the other took his body. One took a moment, but the other took his life. Maybe this is why God gets excited over forgiveness, because it cost God so much. This very sacrifice from God extends to us this morning. I believe forgiveness is the greatest miracle Jesus could ever perform, because it met the world's greatest need. It cost the greatest price God could ever pay, and it provides the greatest blessing the world can ever receive. I don't know about you, but I want to excite God. I want God to get excited. I want God to be filled with passion by what we do, how we sacrifice, how we live and exercise our faith, and how we forgive. And that's how we're going to end worship this morning. We're going to end worship by exciting God, by welcoming some brothers and sisters into our community of faith who stand before us this morning and say, I'll sacrifice, I'll share my faith, I will live in the ministry of healing and forgiveness.